That was Shirley Bassey singing rendition of Goldfinger. Abraham Lincoln said it during the year 1858. Our reliance is in the love of liberty which God has planted in us. The same concept supports the United States fighting man's code of conduct. It is one of your most effective weapons against the enemies of freedom. Serving the Allied forces, this is Armed Forces Radio, Vietnam. Good morning, Vietnam, and welcome back to Part 2 of the Dawnbuster.
I asked a young teacher, a leader of the Buddhist struggle movement, what objections they had to the Saigon government.
My first objection here is that the President Key is too power hungry. And besides, I'd like to tell you and to the world that the first thing is that in spite of the fact that now we have a lot of slogans against the Americans, but that does not mean that the Buddhists are anti-American at all, because we do understand that we need the help of the Americans, as long as they are still the friends of the Vietnamese people. Because in this struggle against the visa, it's not an easy struggle at all, so we need their help.
A lot of people, your detractors, accuse you, the Buddhists, of being pro-VC, that you're pro-communist, that you would like to have a neutralist solution here. Now, what do you think about that?
Oh, this is really a very false accuse, and what I call a labeling. Just if you do not like somebody, just put a label on him and say he's a VC. It's really very funny to say that the Buddhists are VC, because if they were, this country were VC control long time ago, and the Americans are here, cannot stay here any minute longer.
Some of the oldest, toughest-looking Boy Scouts I've seen are members of the Buddhist youth movement. They demonstrate a special brand of escalation. In front of the pagoda, they bring piles of firewood. The Buddhist monks announce that they have volunteers for suicide by fire. The cry is, Key must go. The army now is divided. Supporting the Buddhists, General Dinh.
Yes. You know that John Key must be out. John Key must be out. John Key must be out.
What's wrong with General Key?
You know that when I come here to accept the to command corps, you know, the situation is very, very difficult, you know, because he has...
General Ton Tat Dinh has survived many difficult situations. Only 3 years ago, he was on the other side. He was the general who attacked the pagodas for President Diem.
Stuck on to against them.
General, you've seen many coups in Vietnam. Many, many coups. What effect is all this having on morale in the army?
You know, the morale of the army, you know, when he saw John Key to do that, how that side? When he sends troops here, you know, that she did have morale to do. The morale was allowed if John Key to do that.
Well, what can be done to improve morale?
To improve morale, the best way to do, John Key to up, down. To release the morale up.
Within 100 miles of Hanoi, the carrier Enterprise hurls her thunderbolts at North Vietnam. One of 6 carriers off the coast, she has a crew of 5,000. Payday here is $500,000. In the dim-lit rooms below, pilots are briefed for a raid.
What I'm saying is this, that the weather over the beach is probably going to be worse.
Over the beach is the pilot's slang for North Vietnam. In one respect, it's the war the Americans would like to fight. No Viet Cong or jungle here. The pilots are mostly college graduates in their 20s, but the job is tough enough. The losses have been considerable. A year of bombing has cost 250 jets shot down.
He's going to
They spend up to 6 weeks at a time on station in the China Sea. They go out, sometimes twice a day, out to face targets which are becoming more heavily defended, and therefore greater risks. The bombing has so far failed to achieve its stated aims: to force the North Vietnamese to a conference, to stop the aid they send south. The real military targets, like industry and Hanoi, the pilots can't touch. Many of the targets now are wooden bridges and dirt roads, and the pilots sometimes feel they're trivial for the risks involved.
Stand clear of jet intakes and jet exhaust. Start all go aircraft.
From the decks of Enterprise, the bombing goes on round the clock. They're away for an hour or so. No losses this time. The bombing gets closer to Hanoi. It's now more intense. But the big ship is pulling her punches. What do the pilots say the bombing achieves?
I think it's pretty clear that it's disrupted the lines of communication and transport.
How do you notice that? How do you know?
Well, simply because we cut all the roads and knocked down most of the bridges, and of course the intelligence people tell us this. I'm not sure how managed that news is, but I think it's pretty obvious we have a substantial effect on the supply lines.
You don't really know for sure just exactly how much damage you are doing, and I think most of us would like to know, would like to have a firm idea. We probably don't.
There's another kind of war. Down the jungle paths among the villages, the Americans try to expand their lavish aid programs. Their efforts to raise the standard of living are all too often met with Viet Cong sabotage. This area near Saigon is barely secure. The VC are in full control, only 2 miles away. A young American from Mississippi is in charge of United States aid projects in this province. It's still a contested area in the battle for mines. A crash course in the States taught him Vietnamese.
Ông làm luôn không? Làm chút chút vậy nè. Ông có đốt không? Có chứ. Ở đâu? Ông trồng rau không? Hả? Ông trồng rau không? Rau hả? Dạ. Có lâu không? Lâu mà. Lâu. Nay có chừng.
He's in the front line as much as any soldier. I asked Desai Anderson what they were building here.
This is one of several farm demonstration projects which we have here in the province. And this particular project which we're looking at right now is a dam and a hydraulic ram project, we've dammed up the water here, and it will be forced up through this ramping system so that crops can be raised the year round.
You provide all the money for this, but how important is it that they work on the thing themselves?
Well, this is critical so that they begin to achieve some sort of emotional involvement with the governmental system. And we feel that this makes a lot of difference, for example, in whether or not the Viet Cong would try to destroy or hinder the project in any way.
How genuine do you think this demand of theirs is for things like schools? Or is it a demand that you're creating?
Well, in a certain measure, certainly it is partially stimulated. But, for example, as far as classrooms are concerned, we programmed 41 classrooms in the province, a provincial budget for this year. And instead of that 41, those were built, but in addition to that, the people made applications on the hamlet level and asked for 75 additional classrooms, which they built themselves. And then they work along with various military units that can be enlisted to help them, including the local militia, the popular forces, and they build it themselves.
Do you feel that the military presence in Vietnam is overemphasized?
Well, certainly I would tend to feel that the basic role of constructing the Vietnamese society is the most important thing. The military provide the shield, and the construction of the society is the reason we're here working with this element of it.
Do you believe they make the distinction between what you're doing for them and what the VC say they'll do for them? Do they really understand, do you believe?
I think some inroads are now being made. I think that they appreciate that the Viet Cong are essentially a negative force in this province.
Mr. Long's house is on stilts over the Saigon River. He's a young civil servant and lives with his family. It's a typical Sunday lunch. They're Buddhists. They eat well despite the galloping cost of living. Food is good and fairly cheap. His father worked as a minor civil servant for the French in the post office. He's now retired on a tiny pension. Mr. Long's wife is going to have their first child. They can't travel anywhere without danger. Life in Saigon, they say, is claustrophobic. If they could, they'd like to get away. All they've known for 20 years is war. In spite of having plenty to eat, Mr. Long and his family feel a sense of despair.
My friends, like me, they're complaining about daily troubles, and sometimes they confess to me that they are searching for political conviction. They lack it, as well as me, and if we have no real political conviction, we are in a state of half despair sometimes if our means of living are too low, see.
What are the things that are missing from
That
life?
is a spirit of discipline. We want to be put in a mold, a strong mold, by someone who is worth to be our leader. Up to now, we have seen many governments, many leaders, they pretend to do their most for the countries, but now we are wary of them. We become more and more cynical. That's not my own opinion, that is the same for many of my friends.
Gould's guiding light is Major Mai, a Catholic soldier who fought against the French with the Viet Minh. He left the North when the Communists took over leadership of the independence movement against France. Mai indoctrinates his students with a fiery nationalism, but they're selected by province chiefs, who are often corrupt. His students are patriots. Patriots for who? I asked what ideology they would take with them when they went back to the villages.
We have 4,845 years of history. So out of this long period of life, our ancestors have left us something. And we have it in our own mythology, our legends, and so on. We have the dragon as the force of the matter, and the fairy as the force of the spirit. So dragon and fairy is matter plus the spirit. So this is in essence what we try to give them.
But the reality, if you talk about matter and spirit, the reality is civil war in the country, and Lord knows how many governments in Saigon in the last few years. Now, what do these people represent?
They represent a loss of balance of the spirit and the matter. Now we try to re-establish that balance.
But isn't it important to you, Major, to have this whole idea backed up by strong central government in Saigon, which you haven't got now?
Well, for the peasants, government doesn't go further than the district level. So what happens in Saigon doesn't really matter.
The revolutionary cadres pledged loyalty to the fatherland. They vowed to be well-disciplined, without self-interest, to unite to fight the communists. Did he have any in his village?
Trong tỉnh của anh có nhiều cộng sản không?
Dạ, trong tỉnh tôi thì có chỉ du kích thường thôi, như tỉnh An Giang.
There are several guerrillas in my province.
Several what?
Guerrillas.
Several guerrillas. What will he do to them if he catches them?
Khi nào mà anh bắt được những các cái người du kích cộng sản đó thì anh làm gì đối với họ?
Dạ, khi bắt được du kích cộng sản thì nếu mà những người đó là những người mà căm thù nhất sâu sắc của tôi thì tôi sẽ đem mà giết.
If these guerrillas are those whom I really hate, then I'll kill them.
Under the rubber trees near the Cambodian border, troops of the 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1. The American offensives are now penetrating Viet Cong base areas like this that have been inviolate for many years. The commander of 1st Infantry Division is General William Depew. I asked him what American combat troops had achieved.
Well, I've only been with the division for a month and a half, but I'm starting my 3rd year in Vietnam, and I can say that a year ago, May last year, things were grim. And when you compare the situation today with then, it's the difference between day and night. The VC were closing in on Saigon, roads were closed all over the country. There were no offensive operations into base areas, and all of these things now are moving in the right direction. And I have no doubt but what the military situation is already well in hand and improving very rapidly.
Well, do you believe that you've ever really smashed a big main force, a regular VC force? Or have they all just gone back to being farmers and are waiting for you to go away again?
No, the big forces are waiting up here in the jungle, and one of these days we'll have our day.
Well, they'll fight, you mean?
Well, they'll have to fight or lose the war. And when they fight, they'll lose.